My name is Sandro Masai. I'm an Afro-Brazilian multimedia artist, mainly working with performance. And today we'll talk about my own decolonial art practice. But I trust that you will put my talk into perspective, as I'm only one of the many descendants of the African diaspora. Sandro Masai is my chosen name because my legal name, my name of birth, and the name I was baptized in a Catholic church is Alexandro Almeida da Silva, which is a very long name for an artist. And also it's a very popular name in Brazil. Most of Brazilians are called da Silva. And when Black people are called da Silva, it's because it was a name given by a colonizer during the colonial time. And when you can imagine when the Africans arrived in Brazil as slaves brought by the Portuguese people, they had African sound, some kind of African language name, and of course the Portuguese people want a name that they could pronounce. So they would give European names like Alexandro Almeida da Silva. Also, da Silva means in Old Latin language, from the jungle. So Alexandro Almeida from the jungle, you could say. But not only the Black people in the colonial time got da Silva as a last name, because many Portuguese people, when they moved from Portugal to Brazil, and they want to start a new story and leave behind their past, they would also change their names to da Silva, because it was common already at that time. So da Silva was the colonizer who wants to forget his past, but also giving da Silva as to the slaves, to identify the slaves as their own. The Portuguese people colonized Brazil for over 300 years, and during that time enslaved several Africans. And of course, they didn't want to colonize only the land and the bodies. They wanted to colonize also the souls. So they gave the slaves a new name, a European name, taught them a new language, in my case, coming from Brazil, Portuguese, but you can, again, putting this into perspective, and the religion, of course. So there were several people coming from several different people, tribes from Africa, gathered in Brazil. They had to forget their past, get a new name with the brand of their colonizer, and demonize their gods. This is the right term, to demonize their gods and learn a new religion, Christianism. So they transported. I'm talking about the Portuguese people because it's my own experience, but in the map you can see many Europeans during the colonization time went to Africa, enslaved the people, got to the Americas to work as slaves. The slaves were not passive to the slavery, but whenever they tried to escape or rebel against their colonizers, they would be strongly punished in public to serve as example for the other slaves, to keep them oppressed and afraid. In Brazil today, we celebrate the Black Consciousness Day, which happens every year, the 20th of November. And it's a day to remember the history and the contribution of the Africans to the country. It's also a day to celebrate our African ancestors, and it's also a day to it's also a day to debate or fight for social justice, social equality, and of course, racism. Because even today, there are white people who think that black people are a second class or second whatever. As an artist, in my decolonial practice, so what I do is that I try, knowing the history, I try to embrace the history of my ancestors in my artwork, and that's what I want to share some examples with you here today. For example, if I'm invited to participate in an art festival that happens by the sea, by the beach, then I will celebrate the sea goddess in the Yoruba tradition, Iemanjá. As you can see in this example here, by the beach here at Helles in 2013. In the northeast of Brazil, in the state of Bahia, where I was born, where I come from, we are strongly influenced by the Yoruba people. You can see that in the religion, which in Brazil we call candomblé, but the same effect happens in other countries like Cuba, in the USA, and other countries in Central America. In Cuba, for example, it's called Santeria, in Brazil, candomblé, but it's from the same root, the Yoruba tradition. In the Yoruba tradition, we have several gods that we call orishas. So Iemanjá is one of these orishas. So I try to embrace that in my work as my decolonial art practice, while celebrating proudly my cultural heritage. If I'm invited to do a performance or an artwork in the forest, then I will celebrate the forest orisha, Oshasi. He's the hunter, the deity, the spirit of the forest. Here in an urban space, I'm celebrating another orisha, in this case, the white one, Oshala. Oshala is the orisha that brings peace. The song I started this performance today, it was a song for Oshala. So whenever I have a chance, I will embrace my heritage, my cultural heritage, and proudly perform it for you as my decolonial art practice. In the last 2 years, I have started this long-run project, which is a series of action painting performances. And I have decided that every year, for a whole year, I will celebrate one orisha at once. I started with Ogun, who is the orisha, the warrior, and the one that goes in front and opens the way. So he's also known as the orisha of metal as a material, and also technology as the one that shows the way. If you have paid attention, every time I change the orisha, there is also a new color. Here is Ogun, and this I started this year with celebrating Oshun. Oshun is the goddess of the fresh water, the rivers and waterfalls, and is associated to the gold color, feminine force, represents fertility and beauty. Another expression is this sculpture I made out of bubble plastic. It's called a waterfall, and it's again celebrating the orisha Oshun, the goddess of rivers and waterfalls. I think that's enough for me. Thank you very much.